Are you telling me you're making $5 million on this podcast? Yeah, more or less. I said, well, shit, why am I writing a book? You should write a book when you have something to say, not to help you get to another level of income or whatever. The probability of me writing Atomic Habits or In Search of Excellence or Rich Dad, Poor Dad or 1 Minute Manager is pretty low. So is it worth?
You don't care if the content is going to be evergreen or not.
If it's important enough, then it is evergreen.
Many billionaires, in my personal opinion, who have written books, it's all ghostwritten.
I don't think Elon Musk wakes up and says, how can I pay back society? So you walk in the bookstore and there's thousands of books. Why is anybody gonna pick up my book?
Welcome to Success Story. I'm your host, Scott Clary. The Success Story podcast is part of the HubSpot podcast network. HubSpot has been a huge supporter of the show for over 3 years now, and I'm a big fan of HubSpot because not only do they support the show, but they support entrepreneurs, they support founders, and obviously building businesses, working with entrepreneurs has been a huge part of my career, and building is never easy. HubSpot is not only tools and technology that supports entrepreneurs, but they also offer tons of resources and discounts. But first, what is HubSpot if you've never used it before? It is the platform that unites your entire front office, from marketing to sales to support. It's the platform that streamlines your support tickets, it generates more leads, it increases your sales. It is the platform that scales right alongside you. Don't even get me started on the educational articles, the industry reports, the videos, the tips, the templates, literally everything startup founders need to help scale. HubSpot for startups has it all. Building a business is tough. Maybe make it a little bit easier on yourself. Visit HubSpot.com/startups to see how much you can save and see how much you can learn. I know that you used to speak like 90% of the year. You were traveling to different hotels and whatnot. Outside of the fact that you don't have to, or was that the main impetus for starting a podcast? Was it the fact that you want to just stay at home and talk as opposed to travel and talk?
You know, that is a very astute observation that only a podcaster can make. So what happened was I had a book that was coming out called Wise Guy. And I was on this book tour where I go to podcasters and I record in their studio. And so one day I'm talking to this guy and I say, so what's your business model? He says, oh, I sell an ad at the beginning, in the middle, and at the end. And I say, well, how much do you charge for this? He goes, 25 at the start, 15 in the middle, and 10 at the end. So like, I'm not a math major, but I can add up 25, 15, and 10 in my brain. I come out with 50. And I said, so you're telling me you make 50 grand per episode? And you do 52 episodes. He goes, actually, I do 2 episodes a week, so I do 104 episodes. I said, so you're telling me, are you telling me you're making $5 million on this podcast? And he said, yeah, more or less. I said, well, shit, why am I writing a book? Like, I got to write a book. It takes 4 years. I got to beg for an advance. And then from the time I write the book to the time it comes out is 1 year. And then on the first day that the book comes out, I find out there's all these mistakes and I cannot fix it. And then, in that year, imagine if you wrote a book right before the pandemic and you said something like, well, the key to raising money is face-to-face meetings. And then the pandemic happens, like, I guess that book doesn't work anymore. So anyway, I'm telling you, that's a very astute observation.
You know what's interesting? I always wondered, because I'm a podcaster first, and now I'm trying to write a book as like the brand building play, right? That's you want to have all the different mediums. You want to be on social, you podcast, but I always found it interesting because the book writing process is such a long-winded process. It seems like to write something evergreen, there's a little bit of luck in there too. Make sure that a lot. Because you've written how many books now?
16. Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you want to go off the rails and talk about writing?
We could do whatever. Well, it will actually dovetail into like the book the most recent book. I think it's interesting because you've done it so much. Okay.
Okay, I have this discussion quite often with people about books. So I think that you should approach a book as an end in itself. That is, you have something to say, so you want to write a book, which is very different than saying the book is a means to an end. And when you say a book is a means to an end, to build your brand, to build your image, to position you as a visionary, increase your speaking fees, your consulting, whatever, I think it perverts the process. So what you should do is you should write a book when you have something to say, not because you want it to help you get to another level of income or whatever. So that's thought number one. And I think thought number two is, I've read some amazing number that there's hundreds of thousands of new books every year, and on average they sell about 5,000 copies. So you got to say to yourself, the probability of me writing Atomic Habits or In Search of Excellence or Rich Dad, Poor Dad or 1 Minute Manager is pretty low. So is it worth, let's say you sell 5,000 copies, you make $2 each, just 10 grand. Is it worth that?
That's not even the advance. It's not even the advance if you're going to make $10,000 off it. So now your publisher's pissed off too.
Yeah, so writing a book is not as obvious a method as people might think.
But when you do it, I mean, how do you think through content? So you don't care. You don't care if the content is going to be evergreen or not. It's something that is a problem in your life, and it's a thought that you have, and you bring it to the world, and you hope that it hits. Is that like more or less the strategy? If it's important enough and impactful enough in your day-to-day, then the thesis is it impacts a lot of other people?
Well, I would make the case that if it's important enough, then it is evergreen, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, like I said, I think it starts with you have something to say that people should hear. And I think a very good test for you, or not, I'm not trying to pick on you, but a very good test where...
No, pick on me. You picked on me about my camera setup already. You're just a bully. So no, I'm just kidding. Keep it up.
I'm trying to add value to your podcast.
I know you are. I know.
Okay, so if you're listening, I'm not picking on you now. If you're listening and you think you want to write a book, you have to ask yourself a very tough question, which is, pretend you walk into a bookstore, if there are any more bookstores. So you walk in the bookstore, and there's thousands of books. Most of them are sticking in like that, so you can only go like that to read them. There's some on the table. There's some near the cash register. And you have to ask yourself, why is anybody going to pick up my book? If you're Michelle Obama, I understand that. Stacey Abrams, I understand that. Tom Brady, I understand that. But Joe Blow from Blow Consulting, who has built a $2 million consulting business and has decided to position himself as an executive coach. So he has written a book called The Blow Way, and it's published by Blow Press. Why is anybody going to pick up Joe Blow's book? That's the question you need to ask yourself.
You know what's interesting? How do you tell people nicely that think they're more important than they actually are?
Are you accusing me of telling you?
No, I'm not accusing you. I'm saying that it's a real issue sometimes when people are building a brand. I think that they come from the perspective of, I've done cool shit and people need to hear about it. And this is actually like a personal brand lesson. People don't really care until they care. But how do you get them across that line?
Okay. This is an unexpected podcast as ever.
I love it.
But I think that the desire to build a brand, while it is understandable and even necessary, I think that the way people go about it is wrong. And to pull this into my book, you want to build a brand or you want to be remarkable. So it's not a thing where you wake up one morning and you say, shit, today's the day I'm going to start building my brand. Or shit, today is the day I'm going to start being remarkable. I think the order is you make a difference. You make a great product. You make a great service. And if you make a great product or you make a great service, that's going to build your brand. So a brand comes after, not before. And, to take an extreme example, I'll give you two extreme examples. I guarantee you that Jane Goodall and Steve Jobs never in their lives woke up and said, Jane, you need to build the Jane Goodall brand. Sure, you've done research with chimps and stuff, but you need to be a Jane Goodall brand. And I would be astounded if Steve Jobs ever said, how do I build the Steve Jobs brand? Well, what they did is, Jane Goodall's created this great body of knowledge. Steve Jobs created these great devices. And when you do that, the brand follows. So I guess I'm saying that if you want to build a brand, do good shit and the brand will come.
I love this. I think that people miss that. And I do want to eventually speak about the book you wrote because I think it's very important. And I think listen, all of this speaks to the type of individual that's going to read the book and the message they're going to take from it, because there's so many people, like even the name of your podcast, like Remarkable People, it speaks to an individual that has achieved excellence. And I think that in today's day and age, so many people, again, are focusing on being perceived as excellent or remarkable before they even do the work. I think it's a social media problem. I think it's a comparison problem. I think it's a keeping up with the Joneses problem at an exceptional level that historically we've never seen before. So I think that it's a smart lesson to take away. But also, I mean, like, let's go into what is a remarkable person in your mind. You've spoken to, I think, 200 plus of them on your show. Give me the rundown of remarkable.
Well, first of all, my podcast and my book is like remarkable people. It's not rich people and it's not famous people. It's remarkable people. And I am saying think remarkable, not think rich, not think famous. So what I'm getting at is that I think the way you achieve this level of remarkability is you make a difference, that you change the world. Now, I'm not saying that everybody listening has to be a Steve Jobs or a Jane Goodall, because then I could only sell 2 copies of my book. Maybe not even 2, because Jane and Steve don't need my book. Well, especially if you're dead. But anyway, so what I'm saying is, what my book does, my book is not a self-help book in the sense of this is how to optimize your Instagram post, and this is how to optimize TikTok, and this is how to get published in, Harvard Business Review. This book is about how do I grow, how do I apply grit, and then how do I be gracious? And so if you do those things, if you grow and you work hard, it increases the probability of making a difference. And if you make a difference, you're going to be remarkable. So you don't have to be Steve Jobs or Jane Goodall. You can be remarkable by helping one classroom, one person. There are people in my book and in my podcast that there's a woman who got diagnosed with ALS. typically you die after 2 years with ALS. She decided when she was diagnosed that she was going to run a marathon in all 50 states, and she's done it. So is that Steve Jobs? Is that Jane Goodall? Is she a trillionaire? Is she a billionaire? Have you ever heard of her? No, but that is a remarkable accomplishment. And I swear I have in my podcast, kind of focus, not on purpose, but I have so many people who were snuck into the United States by coyotes across the U.S.-Mexico border. I have people who served 22 years for a murder charge. I have homeless people who were beaten by their parents. I have people who have both parents were crack addicts and now they're professors. You know, that's the kind of people that I talk about in my book. It's not all Jane Goodall and Steve Jobs.
No, it's people that have, again, gone through these incredible, remarkable sort of life events and come out in a very meaningful way on the other side. But
yeah,
the three distinct sections, categories, seasons of somebody's life: growth, grit, grace. Outside of the fact that it sounds great, it's three very good words. Maybe break those down a little bit more as to why each one of those is more important. And
okay,
yeah.
So we have to start with growth, and growth is Carol Dweck. You know, she's the mother of the growth mindset, and her writing had a huge influence on me. Her writing is that you can grow. You know, you're born with a certain set of skills and talents, but you can increase that. And it's very important that you keep growing. Otherwise, you're going to be stuck. So there's the growth mindset. The grit mindset is, you know, life doesn't owe you anything. You have got to work hard. You have got to show up every day. You have got to gut it out. And then the third stage is grace. And the reason why I believe that is because at the end of your life, there's this French concept called noblesse oblige. And it means that, you know, the nobility have an obligation to the rest of society. I think that's too elitist because it implies that, you know, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle and Prince or King Charles, they're the nobility, so they should help the poor people. I think more important is the concept of success oblige, which is when you are successful, you have an obligation to help society and help other people, help younger people, help less fortunate people. And the door that you walked in through, you should keep that door open, if not make it bigger. You have a moral obligation to do that.
Do you feel that we do that well as a society, or are we hurting in that department?
That's an interesting question. You know, I don't have the ability to give you like this really scientifically valid.
Just your opinion. I'm curious.
Well, I think it's generally true. You know, take Jimmy Carter, for example, right? And I hate to admit this, take even Bill Gates. Now, on the other hand, can you imagine when Elon Musk is in his 60s? Hard to imagine he's going to be trying to...
Isn't he already 60? I
don't think so, but let's just say that it would be hard to mention Elon Musk and Jimmy Carter in the same sentence.
Yes. Yeah. I understand where you're coming from. But so with Jimmy Carter, it's pure altruism. It's pure altruism. I would say that it's just to play devil's advocate. Could Jimmy Carter build things that Elon could, for example? Is the most effective way to give back towards altruism and philanthropy, or is it to give back via innovation and creation?
Let's be honest. I don't think...
By the way, I'm not arguing with you. Elon Musk is not Jimmy Carter.
You can argue with me. Let's be honest. I don't think Elon Musk wakes up and says, how can I pay back society? I'll make an electric car. I'll bore tunnels in Las Vegas. I'll make solar panels that look like roof tiles. I'll make reusable rockets. I'll enable satellite internet connection. No, God bless him. I mean, Elon Musk has created some of the greatest innovations ever. But hard to imagine that it was because he wanted to give back to society. Now, it may be that, I can't tell you Steve Jobs was thinking about giving back to society when he invented Macintosh. But I was there, and I'm telling you, we really wanted to improve people's lives. And so, part of the problem with interpreting what other people have done is you really don't know what was going through their mind when they did it. And people change, right? So, maybe Elon Musk in his 70s and 80s is going to be an entirely different person. Who knows?
This is a very interesting conversation, and I can't divert too much from what I actually want to pull out of you, but just quick thought. Future of capitalism should be ethical, conscious capitalism, where you give back. That should be where we go. I always find it interesting because the path there is difficult for me to see, because the people that are the most ambitious and the most aggressive seem to end up building the biggest things, and they don't usually do it from a place of ethical capitalism. It seems to be a personality that drives revenue versus the personality that would, if they had $1 billion organization, what could they do with it?
Okay, so one of the principles that I use in the book, I learned from a guy named Dan Simons. And if you remember, he's the guy who did the video of the invisible gorilla. The invisible gorilla video shows two groups of students, some dressed in black T-shirts, some in white. And the black T-shirt students are tossing around a ball. And so the subjects are told, count how many times the black team passes the beach ball. And then in the middle of this video, another student dressed in a gorilla suit walks in, goes, hoo, 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 and then walks out. And apparently only 50% of the people notice the gorilla. So that's what Dan Simons is famous for. So anyway, so he has this theory that you should always ask what's missing when presented with stories. And I'll give you a really good example of this. So let's say you hear the story that that Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, and Mark Zuckerberg did not finish college. Okay? So you hear that story, and Peter Thiel and all these people are saying, see, there's proof. There's proof. Those 3 trillionaires, they never finished college. You don't need college. Well, when you hear something like that, you need to ask, what's missing? So you're only hearing about the people who are successful without college. You need to hear about the people who are successful with college. You also need to hear about the people who are unsuccessful without college and unsuccessful with college. So there's it's a 2x2 matrix. You're only hearing about these 3 outliers who didn't have a college degree but were successful. And what Dan Simons and his team did is they did research in 2005 or something, and they examined the background of all the CEOs of unicorns, okay? And every one of those CEOs of unicorns had a college degree. So this concept of, I should quit school because Elon Musk, I keep saying Elon, I got Elon on the brain. I should quit school. I don't need to go to college because Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, and Mark Zuckerberg did it that way, is incomplete thinking. You should also look at the other cases where people with college degrees succeeded. And if you think about it, when people say you don't need to go to college, I cite you these three examples. Those three examples span about 30 or 40 years, right? So in 30 or 40 years, you can only cherry pick 3 or 4 examples. That might tell you something. Meanwhile, every CEO of a unicorn has a college degree. That should also tell you something.
So what it says is humans, we are prone to biases in a very, very, very significant way. So much so that it can ruin your life if you aren't careful. Because you could just drop out. I mean, you could drop out, you could pursue something, and you may not be the right mind you may not understand what it takes to be an entrepreneur, drop out of college, and you realize that, hey, I don't want to be working 100-hour weeks. This is not for me. So it's not easy. But this brings me, so to your point, then my own bias is driving my opinion of, can we achieve ethical capitalism? Because I don't have the information and the stories of the people that are driving it.
Okay, here's my thought on that. So there's two kinds of discussions here. One is, as a society, can we achieve ethical capitalism? Which means that a predominance of companies are operating under this, halo of ethical capitalism. That's kind of what your question is. But I would make the point that, yes, in a perfect world, ethical capitalism would predominate. But let's say that you were convinced that that's just a pipe dream. It cannot happen. I would make the case that, you know what? All you can do is all you can do. So maybe 99.9% of companies will not be ethical capitalism, but yours is going to be. So maybe the best thing you can do and what you should do is you be the shining star and you be the ethical capitalist, even though statistically you're a tiny part of the world.
That's a beautiful view to look at life through. Because then if everybody did that, then we would live in a better world. If everybody looked at, yeah, I love that. Let's tie this back because I just find it an interesting topic, and we went there. Let's tie this back to some of the thoughts that you put into this book, into this work. Because this is, again, I think that there is a line here between that specific lens that you look at the world through and becoming remarkable and becoming a person of value and a person that builds something worth building and a person that lives a life worth living and a person that optimizes not just for wealth or fame, but for accomplishment and achievement and value. And these things that I think are lost on people when they first start out. They look for money, they look for influence, but they don't focus on the KPIs that actually matter.
Well, I would make the argument that the most important KPI, and I learned this from Peter Drucker, which is a name most of your audience won't recognize because he was the mother, he was the father of management writing, Peter Drucker. Yeah. And he said the purpose of a company, first I'll tell you what he didn't say. He did not say that the purpose of a company was to increase the wealth of its employees, founders, or of shareholders. Okay? He said the purpose of a company is to create customers. Now, that may take innovation. It may take great execution. It may take, who knows? There's all kinds of ways to create customers. But that's what companies do. And if you create customers, everything else falls into place, right? The revenue, the brand, all the good stuff. But that Apple created customers where there were none before because people used a computer called Macintosh that they never would have used a computer before. So the job of an entrepreneur is to create a customer. Now, I have a tech bias, but to take an extreme example, if you're starting a sushi bar, your job is to create customers, people who love raw fish.
How do you do that? How do you create customers? This is a cheap question because you have so many years of experience. And this is what you've done for Apple, for Canva, I think for Mercedes. You're an evangelist. You create customers to a degree, along with a lot of other people and systems and support and processes. But if just at a very high level, what is the tool or the strategy or the idea of creating a customer?
Well, believe it or not, I can explain this.
You've been good at explaining everything else. This is not like new. You're very good at this podcast thing.
I'm used to be on the other end where I ask the hard question, not answer them. You know what I'm saying? So here are some.
Right up
and listen, you kind of couch that question is at a high level. I don't live at a high level. I live at a low level. I live, boots on the ground. And so I'll give you some boots on the ground ways to think of how to create products or services that create customers. So, number one technique is you go and see. So you actually go and see what people are doing, what people need. This is very different than you read reports or you're looking at your benchmarks, or you're looking at the executive summary, or your feedback mechanism. You actually go and see how people are using a Chrysler minivan so you can make a better Toyota Sienna, right? Now, that's one level. You go and see. Secondly, you go and be, which is even better, because now instead of watching how a family of 4 with 2 baby strollers and 2 baby seats and 2 baby bags are trying to drive around in a sedan. Now you go and be. So now you go and figure out, okay, I'm going to go buy a minivan and I'm going to see what it's like to have 2 strollers, 2 baby seats, 2 baby bags. I'm going to be the customer that I want to appeal to and create. That's theory number 1. Theory number 2 complements that, which is many people, they are trying to do something that they're good at, they like, helps their brand, whatever, all that stuff. So they're working forward. You can do this. I can do this. I love it. That's what I'm going to do. Now I got to make people buy that. I would say that a better method is, instead of working forward from what you can and like to do, you should work backwards from what people need. So, to take a negative example, maybe you're really good at making chemicals and putting them on film or paper. So you're Kodak and you're just kicking ass in analog photography. You're good at making chemicals, right? It's lucrative. You're the industry standard, blah, blah, blah. So now you just keep making film. Now, if you were working backwards from the customer, you ask yourself, well, why are people buying our film? Why are people making Kodak slides? And you would come to the conclusion that they're trying to preserve these precious moments in their lives, graduations, games, whatever. So we're in the business of helping people preserve special moments. If you take that attitude, then it would not matter how you preserve those moments. And so Kodak should have embraced digital photography. They should have figured out, we're in the preserve special moments business. It's much better to preserve a special moment using a sensor than film that you take to a drugstore, that you wait a week, and then you get 36 exposures back, and 36 are underexposed or overexposed, and shit, that precious moment is gone, right? It's much better to, look at the back. I caught the moment. Yeah, baby. In fact, I can post it right now. The irony of this story is that Kodak in 1975, it invented the first digital camera. Like, wrap your mind around that. Digital camera was invented by Kodak. I mean, if that's not a WTH moment, I don't know what is, right? Now, to be fair, if you're Kodak in 1975 and this engineer says, hey, I figured out a way people don't need to buy film, you can kind of understand why they might not exactly, embrace his invention. And let's face it, that first digital camera probably weighed 10 pounds. It was like 100 pixels. And there were like a lot of challenges, but still, why is Kodak gone and we're all using Sonys and Canons and Nikons, today?
When you wrote this book, there's sort of two things I want to pull out of this. First of all, I know for a fact that you don't like when people forget Kodak. That's an enterprise example. When people starting businesses follow their passions, because I think that I've heard you say this before. It's really bad advice to tell somebody to go follow your passion. But there's another thought involved in this, and you can comment on both. Because you start the book with the Think Different campaign that Apple ran in 97. And thinking different probably also ties into the fact that the way you build something is not about following a passion. It's about reverse engineering something that maybe only you see that you can solve for. I don't know if that's a fair through line to those two ideas, but I think there's something there, because if you didn't think different, then you would follow your passion and you do what everyone else is doing and you do what the market's doing, and you'd probably have a hard time doing it because it'd be a very messy space to get involved in.
Okay, this is a deep topic. So everybody hears, follow your passion, find your passion, do your passion. And I think that sets you up for failure, because it implies that everybody has this one particular calling. And, at an extreme, it's like, oh, you're 22 years old. You haven't found your passion yet. What kind of underachiever are you, right? And so ideally, you would find your passion before you have to write your college application essay, which is total bullshit. Well, most of those essays are all bullshit. At least ChatGPT is generating them, so it's easier to generate the bullshit.
Now you don't have to waste as much time doing the bullshit. Exactly.
So what I'm saying is, give yourself a break, okay? I think you should just pursue your interests, which is different. It's a much lower bar than passion. Passion implies that it's, you found your calling in life. I'm 69 years old. I found my calling in life maybe 3 or 4 times, and it's not that easy. And so what I think you should do is, when you have an itch, scratch it. It may be photography. It may be the viola. It may be surfing. It may be podcasting. It may be writing. You're going to have all these interests. Scratch them until you decide that you don't like it. And then if you're lucky, over the course of your lifetime, you may discover something you truly want to dig deep and dedicate your life to. But to use a dating analogy, if somebody told you, oh, you're 22 years old, you haven't found the man or woman of your dreams yet, what's wrong with you? Well, what I'm advocating is, if you go out in the world and you say, I'm going to find the person that I'm going to spend the rest of my life with, that's my goal. What you should do instead is you should pursue people who you find interesting. It's like sampling theory. Do a lot of I'm not advocating, being loose. I'm just saying you should pursue a lot of interesting people until you find the one that you want to settle down with. But to say that, you got to go find your passion, go from point A to point B, I think you're setting yourself up for failure.
Using you as as a case study or an example, people listening to this would look at you and say, Guy is successful. He's had a great career. Do you think that you found something that you can say is a passion? Because you scratched a lot of itches in your life with the different things you've taken on. So has there been one, or has it just been success at a multitude of things that you've liked to do?
Okay, so first of all, I want to burst a bubble. It's not like I sat down with my life coach back when I was young and we decided the arc of my life, all right? So basically, I've gone from one interest that became passion to another. It started with Macintosh, right? So with Macintosh, I thought Macintosh, when I first saw Mac Paint and Mac Write, the scales were removed from my eyes. It was a religious experience. The only 2 or 3 other religious experiences in my life have been like the first time I played hockey, the first time I surfed, and the first time I met my wife. So, doesn't happen that often. So, as you go along, and then so first there was Macintosh. And then I got to tell you, Canva became a passion. And to use more sports analogies, I discovered basketball. And then I started playing tennis. And then I started ice hockey at 44. And then I started surfing at 60. Okay, so just using the sports metaphor, I found passion 4 times. But it was because I tried a lot of other stuff. And so so now fast forward till today. Writing books has been a passion. You don't write 16 books because you hate it. And I think even more important now, I discovered podcasting. And I discovered podcasting about 4 years ago. And I'm telling you, I was born for podcasting. I was made for podcasting because podcasting, to me, it requires several things. First, you need access to people. And the kind of podcasting I'm talking about is like what we're doing, which is a guest. So number one, you need access to people. Not necessarily that you know them, but they have to know of you. Luckily, because of my Macintosh work, many people know of me. So when I ask them to be on my podcast, almost all the time they say, oh, yeah, I use the Macintosh. I knew all about you. I'd love to get on your show. That's a huge advantage, right? So now you got to have access to the Jane Goodalls of the world. The second thing is, once you have access, you got to know what the hell to ask Jane Goodall, right? And then the third thing is, you not only have to have access, and you have to know what to ask. You got to have the balls to ask it.
Yeah, it's true. It's stressful. It's very stressful.
Yes, it's very stressful. So, I've just been fortunate that those 3 things lined up for me. And so podcasting, I'll tell you something. So I have done about 200 episodes of my podcast. I think roughly 100 or so were sponsored. Okay? But for the last 2 years or something, I'm operating my podcast at a total loss. I don't have sponsors. I don't have an advertiser. I just do it out of pure love and OCD-ness. And you know, I think my podcast is the best work that I've ever done, and it will not be appreciated until I die. Not that I want to try that experiment, but you know, so a lot of people say you need to use a Venn diagram, and the Venn diagram is what you love to do, what you're good at, and what you can make money at, right? And when you can draw those three circles, you look at what's in the middle. That's what you should do.
Well, what is that? Is that the concept of Ikigai?
Well, I can't tell you that I love the concept of Ikigai, but I think our Western minds has perverted that concept, because the concept that you got to love it, you got to be good at it, and you got to make money at it, I think is a bastardization of the concept of Ikigai. Now, don't get me wrong, okay? I may be Japanese, but I was born and raised in Hawaii. It's not like I've been spending 20 years of, my life in Japan, and I'm a Buddhist monk, and I'm a whole Shinto scene and all that, all right? I'm as freaking American as Eric Trump.
And you're a little bit Canadian.
That's an insult.
Play hockey too. I know it.
First of all, I never met a Canadian I didn't like. Seriously, I cannot say that about Americans. But anyway, so, okay, if you want my definition of Ikigai, it's kind of the opposite. So many people believe Ikigai, what you're good at, what you love to do, and what you can make money. My definition of Ikigai is it's something that you do even if you're not good at it, even if you can't make money at it, and even if you're not good, so you're not, wait, did I say that right? So you're not good at it. You can't make money at it, but you still love to do it. That's your Ikigai. That's the Ikigai test. And I'll give you a related concept. So I interviewed Mark Manson, the guy who wrote The Subtle Art of Giving a F-U-C-K, right? Or not giving. And he, in our interview, he gave me this like really brilliant insight. And he basically said, you're going to know when you found your passion or your true love or your Ikigai when it involves shit sandwiches. And these shit sandwiches, everybody looks at you and says, that is a shit sandwich. There's no way I'm going to do that. But you love the shit sandwich. And I got to tell you, when you find yourself doing something that involves shit sandwiches that everybody else tell you you're nuts, you probably found your Ikigai.
I just want to take a second and give a shout out to HubSpot and the HubSpot Podcast Network. That's who brings you this show every single week. If you love Success Story, you'll love some other great podcasts in the HubSpot Podcast Network, like Creator Science. It's one of my personal favorites. It's hosted by Jay Klaus. Creator Science goes behind the scenes of today's top creators. They do interviews, and Jay explores how creators like Tim Urban, James Clear, Tori Dunlap, Cody Sanchez are building their audiences today. And honestly, by learning how these creators make a living with their art and their creativity, Creator Science really helps you gain the tools and confidence to do the same. This is where I go for my playbook on how to learn from the best creators. Listen to Creator Science wherever you get your podcasts.
Do you think that is the secret to doing something that you can eventually turn into a business, this empire, whatever? Or is that just something that should stay as a hobby? Because I personally believe that when you find that thing, if you do it for 10 to 15 years and you build feedback loops and you iterate and you incorporate learnings, you will eventually be a level of significant success. You may not be the 0.01%, but you're not going to be bad. You can't, if you're shit after 10 years, that's a serious concern. You got to prove.
Listen, this is... This is a very, believe it or not, this question you asked has moral implications, because, the easy answer would be for these influencer, thought leader, executive coaches writing books. The easy answer is yes. You should pursue your passions, even if you cannot make money at it, and do what you love and the money will come. Okay? I cannot tell you that I truly believe I should say something like that. I am very lucky. Don't get me wrong. So the fact that I can operate a podcast for 2 years with no income from it is because I'm lucky. It's because I can afford to do this. Not everybody can afford to do this. So it would be superficial, if not downright evil, for me to tell people, oh yeah, go do something for 2 years that you cannot make money at it, and just trust that the people someday will pay you. I think that's irresponsible. So
But what if you can say that? What if you can say that? Understand that will take you 5 years and set your life up so that, if possible, you can maintain it. I think the expectations then, because I agree with you, you can't set false expectations.
Right. So I mean, if listen, you gotta eat. Right? You got to put food on the table. You got certain things you got to do. So it may be that you got to do that during the day, but at night you do your podcasting, or at night you make samurai swords, or at night, you make the best quesadillas in California. I mean, or you write a book. Who am I to tell you that, right? So I love that path. But the concept that, hey, quit your job, burn your bridges, and go focus on writing your book. I'm not going to tell you that. I think that, that's like...
That's bad advice. That's toxic.
Yeah, that's bad advice. That's bad. You got responsibilities. Let's be real here. You got responsibilities.
One of the things that you did mention, you referred to Steve Jobs' commencement quote about connecting the dots, looking backwards, which I think is, that's a very famous quote, a very famous clip. But so this is a 2-part question, and as a podcaster, you probably already hate me for saying that. So the first part is, have you looked back and connected the dots looking backwards in your life? Does it make sense? But then the more important question is there a way to predict the dots looking forward?
The answer to the first question is yes. The answer to the second question is no. Look, as I look, okay, here, I'll do Steve Jobs on steroids, commencement address. I'll connect the dots for you, okay? So I was born and raised in Kalihi Valley in Honolulu, Hawaii, poor district in Hawaii. I was in a public school system, elementary school. 6th grade teacher tells my parents, your son has too much potential. Get him out of the public school system. Put him in private school. Get him college prep. He should go to college. He has too much potential. Thank you, God, she said that. Thank you, God, again, that my parents listened to her. Thank you, God, that my parents were willing to sacrifice to put me in that school. So I get in that school. Now, I don't know why I did it. I don't know how the hell I got in. I'm so old that back then, being Asian American, you were an oppressed minority, so you got into places that you couldn't get into now. So somehow, somebody made a mistake at Stanford and they admitted me. So now, I wanted to go to Occidental because I could have played football there. But my father said, son, if I'm paying all this money, you're going to Stanford. You ain't going to pick your school by where you can play football. Otherwise, go to UH. It's free. Okay, Dad, Stanford it is. So I go to Stanford. At Stanford, for the rest of your life, you get to say you went to Stanford. And that's a proxy. I'm not saying it's always justified, but when you tell people you went to Stanford, at least in Silicon Valley, it's a proxy for, oh, that guy must be smart. Now, I'm sure there are a lot of dumb people who went to Stanford. Maybe I was one of them. But that's just the way the world works. You say you went to Stanford, you get instant cred. While at Stanford, I happened to meet a guy from Phoenix, Arizona. And I love cars. This is a whole nother story. I love cars because when I was in high school, somebody gave me a ride in his 911. And I got in that car and I said, holy shit, guy, this is why you need to study hard. And then also in high school, I lived in a lower middle class place. I got robbed twice on the bus. I got hijacked. So I also said to myself, Guy, you need to study hard because you don't want to live in some place that you get hijacked and robbed and you're driving a shitty car. So that was my motivation. So anyway, I get to Stanford. I love cars. I meet this other kid. He loves cars. We instantly become friends, except he was rich. And so, I remember once, I think for Thanksgiving, I went to his house in Phoenix. And his father picks us up in his freaking Rolls Royce.
Well, he's doing well.
Coming from Kalihi Valley. Let's just say that there weren't too many Rolls Royces around there. So I get in this Rolls Royce and they take me to their house and their backyard is the Arizona Biltmore golf course. Like, holy shit. My head is exploding. I just rode a Rolls Royce and these guys live on a freaking golf course in Hawaii. The equivalent is like the Wailea Country Club. And let's just say I did not live close to the Wailea Country Club. Anyway, so then I meet this guy, become friends. Years later, he hires me into Apple as the second software evangelist. I become well-known and successful because of my work at Stanford, in the Apple on Macintosh. Years later, I get an email from someone who runs TEDx Palo Alto. She says, you don't know who I am, but I know who you are because I use the Macintosh. And I have Jane Goodall coming to give a TEDx talk, and I need a moderator. And I want you to moderate this panel. I mean, not this panel, this fireside conversation. It's you and Jane. Like, holy shit. I had a paid speech scheduled. I canceled that. Cost me a lot of money to interview Jane Goodall on stage. So I interviewed Jane Goodall on stage. We become friends. She becomes my first guest on my podcast. And you as a podcaster, you understand that whenever you are asked to be on a podcast or you ask people, the first question in your mind is, who else has been on this clown's podcast? Right? So when I ask people and they say, well, who else has been on your podcast, Guy? And I say, you may have heard of some of them. It's Jane Goodall, Margaret Atwood, Stacey Abrams, Bob Cialdini, Steve Wozniak, Stephen Wolfram, Angela Duckworth, Katie Milkman. That's the kind of people I have on our podcast. And, if you feel that you're above them, then okay, whatever.
Don't bother. But
okay, so we're getting back to the Steve Jobs story. So now, I'm telling you, I'm looking back and I'm saying the reason why I got Jane... Oh, and by the way, Jane Goodall wrote the foreword for this book, Think Remarkable. Okay?
I heard her at Inbound last year. She's a remarkable speaker. Or the year before, rather.
Yeah.
Very, very good.
So I'm looking back and connecting the dots, and I'm telling you that the reason why Jane Goodall was the first guest on my podcast and wrote the foreword for my book is because a 6th grade teacher 30-something years ago told my parents to take me out of the public school system. That's connecting the dots. Now, the second part of your question is, well, can you predict the dots so you optimize your path? And I will tell you that I, with total certainty, believe that it is not possible to do that. Because, if I hadn't, along the path, I went to law school for 2 weeks and I couldn't stand it, so I dropped out. Had I not dropped out, I probably would not be in tech, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, there's so many things that you think it's the end of the world, but looking back, you say, thank God I didn't do that. I mean, I'll give you another great example. If I had discovered surfing when I was living in Hawaii as a kid, I would not be on your podcast today because I probably would not have written 16 books because surfing is such an addictive sport. So, thank you, God, that I never took up surfing in Hawaii when I was a kid. So, I think it's impossible to predict the dots.
It's very interesting when you trace that back. I love that you've traced that back too. I think that it gives you this massive amount of confidence. Like you said, that even the worst situations and the most stressful things in your life, they always play a part in the end of the story, no matter what.
Seriously, no matter.
Yeah,
I mean, I often talk to young college graduates, and they're so worried about picking the perfect first job, right? And, their idea is, I'm going to pick this perfect first job working for McKinsey or working for Goldman Sachs, or I'm going to be, employee number 5 of the next Google or whatever, right? Hallelujah. God bless you if you think that's true. But let's take the worst case example, that your first job out of college, you went to Stanford, you majored in biochemistry, and your first job is a scientist at Theranos, right? So you're on the Theranos staff.
Yeah.
And your freaking CEO is saying, yeah, we got this magic machine. You give me 1 drop of blood, I could tell you everything that's wrong with your
But
health.
you think you're killing it. You think your career's set. You're like, this is going to be this is a huge disruptor. Yeah, everything's going right.
Right? I work for Theranos. We have 2 secretaries of state on our board of directors. We have the VCs on our board of directors. We have, all these people, and our CEOs on the cover of Fortune magazine, the hottest CEO in America, the next coming of Steve Jobs, blah, blah, blah. Oh my God. I have threaded the needle. And then Theranos implodes like it has. Now, so you pick the worst job in the world thinking that you picked the best job in the world.
Mm-hmm.
I will make the case that probably working for Theranos, unless you went to jail anyway, assuming you didn't go to jail and you work for Theranos, that might be one of the best experiences you ever had, because you would learn about arrogance, you would learn about stupidity, you would you would learn about dishonesty. You would learn about, you have to ask yourself, why did all these secretaries of state and all these really famous people join this board? It's because they assumed that because she went to Stanford, or because, the other person joined, because whatever, that they're all proxies for quality. So yeah, it's the bandwagon effect. So if nothing else, if you worked at Theranos, you sure as hell should have learned that the bandwagon effect is a very dangerous thing.
But you could also take away the inverse of that lesson, which is you understand how to leverage certain things to get what you want, which is fine if you're doing it in an ethical, moral way. There's ways to build a business based on your where you went to school or what you've accomplished or the people that that can help you get there quicker. It's just you have to have some actual substance behind what you're trying to build, not a Theranos situation. But
I would say the good discussion of this is that you do whatever it takes to get your foot in the door. It may be the proxy that you went to Stanford.
Mm-hmm.
It may be that, your father is Bill Gates. It may be any of these things. But I think one of the harsh realities in life is once you're in the door, nobody gives a shit if your father is Bill Gates. Nobody gives a shit if you went to Stanford, if you went to Harvard, if you worked at McKinsey or Goldman Sachs. Nobody gives a shit at that point. You either deliver or you don't. So you have to understand that.
And actually deliver. And don't lie when you can't deliver. That's the biggest takeaway. You raise money, you better build that shit. You You don't, yeah, that's the biggest issue. That's the biggest issue is that the money comes, the investment comes, and then the execution doesn't come. I was, you know what I was just watching? I was just watching, we'll try and keep this as evergreen as possible, but this show will be out for a while. The show that I'm referring to, the Bitcoin show on Netflix. Have you seen that yet? Basically, they raised something like, I don't know, it was like 40, 50 million for some crypto project, and they just never built the thing. I mean, with 40, 50 million, you could build the thing. Normally, you can, that's a lot of money.
You would think. I mean, listen, we could spend a lot of time on crypto. That's something that my limited brain just cannot understand. Why anybody would get involved with crypto. I mean,
well, it's not because of the technology. For probably 95% of people, it's because there's a get rich quick component.
Well, yeah, and like sometimes I like have this out of body experience. So it's like, if I said to you, Scott, I want you to invest in this. Let me describe it. There's this mysterious Japanese guy that no one can quite identify who invented this. And this is a currency that's not backed by anything. Not that any currency really is backed by anything. And he promises that there's only going to be, I don't know, whatever the number is, 6 million of these things ever. And you have to build these huge server farms to calculate and create these things, so much so that, you need to build these things where power is cheap, and it's huge consumption of electrical power. And then you're going to be rich because of it. And to me, the whole concept of this cyber currency, okay, so when you talk to seemingly intelligent people about it, and they say, well, Bitcoin is a great hedge against inflation, and typical currencies today, they're controlled by dark money, and they jimmy the system, and it's subject to inflation. But Bitcoin's not like that, because it's like digital, and nobody can screw with it. And like, what the hell are you talking about? Everybody in the business is going to jail. I mean, like, what part of this, like, the whole investment thesis of Bitcoin is, there are people stupider than me. That's a bad investment thesis. Anyway.
It is. Anyways.
I just lost all the potential Bitcoin readers of my book.
It's okay. There's other ones. There's other people that can pick it up. I have 2 more thoughts to pull out of this. Is that okay? There's 2 more things that I wanted to pull out. First, I wanted to talk about imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Because it's brought up in the book. It's something that impacts everyone. I want you to speak about your own experience with it. I want you to speak about thoughts on it. And then I thought you brought a really interesting point about why it impacts women, because I literally had this conversation with somebody about 3 hours ago. This woman sold her company for, it was a 9-figure exit. It's a notable brand. So that's over 100 million, and she still has imposter syndrome. Please help us and her. You don't know her. Maybe one day you will, but she's a good friend. But please help us understand why it impacts women to such a degree, and how to solve for that.
Well, my observation, having interviewed 200 remarkable people, is that imposter syndrome is primarily a problem for women. Like, I can honestly tell you, no man has ever come on my show and said, I have imposter syndrome. When I was named CEO, or when I was appointed to the board, or when I, achieve all this great success, I really questioned whether I deserved it and whether I would be exposed. That conversation has never occurred. So a lot of it is just about the shitty way that males treat women and society treats women. They're operating from a disadvantage. And so, and the women who had imposter syndrome, I mean, I go into great detail about how, like, document your accomplishments, and not necessarily to put them out, but you document your accomplishments for your own mind. You look at it and you say, okay, yeah, I wrote down this and this and this. Holy shit, I really did do good stuff, right? And then, you need to surround yourself with people who are supportive, who understand what you're going through, and they tell you that, you need to believe. I mean, wake up, honey. I mean, you freaking sold your company for $100 million. What are you worried about? These dickheads are telling you that you shouldn't be a CEO or a board member. Like, what? Be real.
It's a big issue. I think it's the circles that you surround yourself with, because that was one example. I have another friend who was like a Forbes, whatever, I think 30 under 30. She sold her company. It was another different person, less. And she thought after she sold her company, she would be invited into deals and she would have access to, these great VC opportunities for these awesome companies that are usually backroom deals like Google and, their seed round or something like that. And nobody would put anything in front of her, to the point where she actually started a private equity firm herself. And she was just iced out of a lot of conversations. So there's an issue. There's a big issue, because that type of behavior then reinforces the I'm not good enough.
I don't know what to say. I mean, I think what you said is absolutely true. And
it's just unfortunate, really.
It is. And it's suboptimal. It's certainly not ethical capitalism. It's a waste of a lot of people's potential. And it's basically because men are insecure. Seriously.
Yeah, I know.
It really is. I mean, it comes down to that. Like, I don't know how else to put it. Men are.
Did you ever have imposter syndrome when you took on anything in your career at all, even at a young age, when you were hired to Apple, or were you like, this Apple, I'm better than Apple. They're blessed to have me.
Well, I have never thought any place is blessed to have me. I cannot tell you I ever had really serious imposter syndrome. And, there's a lot to unpack here. But, well, first of all, I've never been the CEO of a billion-dollar company. I've never been on the board of directors of, a Fortune 500 company. So I was never in the position where I said, holy shit, I'm on the board of directors of Procter & Gamble. Do I deserve to be here? Because I've never been on the board of directors of Procter & Gamble. So one way to solve the imposter syndrome is you just not put in positions of high status.
But you're discounting your own success too. When a brand like Canva or Mercedes, these are not like mom and pop brick and mortar $5 million businesses.
Sure. But I think, like, if you said, Guy, you have a choice. You can either have imposter syndrome or you can have entitlement syndrome. Guess what? It's much better to have imposter syndrome and wonder if you deserve it than have entitlement syndrome and say, of course I deserve it. In fact, I deserve more.
I think most guys have entitlement syndrome.
I think so too.
I think that's it's a sad truth that I think that's what allows them to take the risks and the chances in their career, because they feel they deserve it.
Yeah. I don't know.
But listen, it's not an easy thing to solve for. It's just a matter of surrounding yourself with the right people. That's really it.
Well, I'll give you and your listeners a real...
Listen, you're the one who said you wanted the hard questions. These are the hard questions people are solving. I can ask the easy questions. I can ask what Steve Jobs was like. But
wait, I'm going to give you a real good tip about imposter syndrome. I have to first tell you a story that you might think is unrelated. So
You're
Julia
actually you're a
Cameron,
very good
she's in the
storyteller,
book.
by the way.
She even gave me a blurb.
Yeah.
Julia Cameron has this fictional negative friend called Nigel. So Nigel, do you know who Julia Cameron is? The Artist's
I don't.
Way.
I don't know.
Okay. She wrote a book called The Artist's Way, like 20 million copies sold. She is the mother of creativity, Julia Cameron. Okay. So she has this fictional negative friend called Nigel. And Nigel says, oh, your writing isn't that good. Your speaking is not that good. You're not really helping people. Oh, this draft sucks, whatever. This is an imaginary friend. And one of the ways I think she uses Nigel is she has compartmentalized negativity and imposter syndrome into Nigel. She kind of have sectioned him off in her life.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a tip there that if you have imposter syndrome, first you realize that there is this thing called imposter syndrome. So you're not alone. It's not like every other blowhard in the world isn't thinking this. Like lots of people think this. So number one, it's common. It's so common. My God, it's a syndrome. You don't get to be a syndrome if only one person has it, right? Stockholm syndrome, a lot of people got it, I think. Anyway, so number one is, this is a real thing. It's called a syndrome. So that's number one. And number two, I think if you can label it, then you can reduce its impact on your brain. Because you can say, I was appointed to the board of directors of Procter & Gamble. I went in the room and I looked around and there's the CEO of Nike and there's the CEO of Mercedes-Benz and there's the, Nobel Prize winner. There's a MacArthur Award fellow and, and I got imposter syndrome when I became appointed to the board of Procter & Gamble. But I think what you can say is, you say first, imposter syndrome is a thing. And then you say, then I think you can trivialize it more and you can say, that's just the imposter syndrome. I can just put it in a box and say, label it, imposter syndrome. Oh yeah, next. What's next?
I love it. Address it though. Really address it. Like face it, basically.
Well, you should also, in a sense, you should thank God that you say, you know what, I got imposter syndrome. I'm not sure I deserve this. But that's a lot better than having entitlement syndrome where I'm the asshole who thinks I deserve this and more. That's harder to fix.
I want to give you just give you the floor to speak about the book very briefly, because all the things we've spoken about today are pulled from the book. So these are all different concepts, ideas, most of them anyways. I say like 80%, maybe 85%. I tried.
You know what?
You're an easy person to talk to. I could talk to you about anything for a long time. That's an issue. Not really. We're podcasters. But I mean, when we're trying to get some points in, it is an issue. What were you going to say?
I got to tell you, man, we are separated at birth, kindred spirits. Because
I know we are.
No, seriously, because often when I have an author on my podcast, I do this at the end too. I say, listen, I give you the floor. Go ahead, pimp your book.
Yeah?
And I thought I was an innovator. Shit, I got imposter syndrome. You did.
No.
So,
There's great minds. That's it. I'll just stick with that. No. So
listen.
Okay. Who is this book for? Who's reading this book? And also, I need to ask you about AI in a second, because that's actually very interesting as well. But who's this book for?
Ask me the question different. Ask me, what's this book about?
How is that? That's a more vanilla version of the same fun. Whatever. It's your show.
No,
what was the book about?
You know why? I can tell you a funny story. Man, your listeners are gonna say, man, that guy, he's like all over the map. Like, what's wrong with him?
No.
So
they'll like it.
This is a legendary story. And the story is that at a press conference with Tom Clancy announcing his new book, hopefully your audience knows who Tom Clancy is.
Between Peter Drucker and Tom Clancy, I mean, I know all these people. Listen, I think it's an older audience. It's like 30.
Okay, good. So they know
30
who
to
Tom
40.
Clancy is.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So some reporter asked Tom Clancy, "What's your book about?" And you know what his answer was? "It's about $20." So wait, what was the question? Shit, I forgot the question.
No, the question was, I said, who is this book for? And then you said, ask me what the book's about.
Okay, I knew there was a related question. This book is for anybody with $25. This book, I think the most obvious path is a parent or teacher or coach is buying this for a young person who is searching for direction. And like, let's take the parent case. The parent case is, I've been telling my son, I've been telling my daughter, don't just focus on one thing. Do a lot of sampling. Pursue your interests. Don't worry about, getting too deep, too quick. Or I've been telling my son or daughter, you know what? You can't just like show up at 9 a.m., leave at 4 p.m., ask for 50%, raise, and always want remote work. You got to show some grit. You got to do the shit that nobody else wants if you want to get ahead in life. But my kids don't listen to me. So read this freaking book, for crying out loud, and listen to Guy, because you're not listening to me. That's use case number one. But if you're buying it for yourself, I think it will help you add clarity to techniques and directions for your life. And I just want to make this something perfectly clear, that this is not the gospel according to Guy, okay? This book reflects interviews with 200 remarkable people, like truly remarkable people. And I'm telling you, it's not just Jane Goodall and Steve Wozniak. It's also, like I said, people who have served 22 years for a murder sentence, who is now one of the hottest artists on the East Coast. There's a lot of very interesting stories in this. And so this is not the gospel according to Guy. This is Guy's analysis of what has made people remarkable, so that you can be remarkable too. That's what this book is about.
If you had to tell people out of all the interviews, step one on how to become remarkable, what would that step be?
Step number one is embrace the growth mindset, that you can do more, you can learn more, you can be more. And there's also a flip side to the growth mindset that very few people embrace, and it's this. The growth mindset is not only about people who are learning more and better and everything. It's also part of the fixed mindset is, I am really good at physics, and I don't want to risk my reputation or self-image by trying surfing. That's a fixed mindset too, right? So a lot of the problem with the fixed mindset is, oh, honey, you're so great at physics. Why don't you try surfing? Or why don't you try poetry? Or why don't you try East Asian history? I say, no. I'm a physics prodigy. I'm not going to risk my reputation. And that's a bad thing too. So it's not just saying, hey, you're a loser, you don't have a growth mindset. That's not it at all. It's like everybody should have a growth mindset. And if you don't have that, it's going to be very hard to make a difference and to be remarkable.
That's the universal truth that you've probably found across every single person.
Well, and the second universal truth, just, that's why I organized the book, not just that I love tricolons and alliteration, but there's growth, and everybody I met who's remarkable had grit, and everybody I met who is remarkable has grace. And I'll tell you something, just to prove my point, there is not one hedge fund or private equity manager in the book or on my podcast. Think about that for a second. I don't think there's any billionaires on my podcast. If the only private equity hedge fund kind of guy that I would have on my podcast is Warren Buffett. That's it. I don't care. I don't care if you can get the president of MIT or Penn or Harvard fired. That don't make you remarkable.
How do you measure grace in your life?
I think you measure grace in your life by trying to help the next generation.
Like you said, leave the door wider than you found it.
I mean, if it's a door, make it into a sliding door.
Make it into a garage door. Make it into something.
That's right. That's right.
I love this. One thing I thought was very interesting, because you used AI, correct, for this book?
Oh, yeah.
So I thought that was interesting that you brought that up, because I think that, it's interesting. I think a lot of people will start using AI for writing. I don't think many will actually admit it, because it's new, it's taboo, it's uncomfortable right now to leverage this tool, because it's like, so I don't know. I feel like I use it as a valuable tool. Like, I think it's incredible. It takes everything I know, and it reduces the time and the friction to create good work, and I still need to add a human touch to it, which is fine. But I think that every time you add a new technology, people look at it as cheating for the first little bit, and start using it themselves.
Okay, man, I love your questions. I don't say that to everybody.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
So first of all,
I just talk about stuff I'm interested in. That's really it. It's a very easy formula.
Well, I purposely acknowledged in my book that I used AI. I used ChatGPT, I used Claude, I used Bard, and for writing, I also use Quillbot. So I use four applications, right? And first of all, I wanted to be transparent that, I'm not going to tell you that it is all written by me and all that, although it kind of is. But the way I use AI is I think of it as a outstanding research assistant available 24/7 for $20 a month, who can come up with answers in 30 seconds. Like, holy shit. I mean, okay, so I'll give you some examples. So one of my concepts that I learned is that lots of remarkable people, they made major career shifts, right? So Jane Goodall studied biology her whole life. Roy Yamaguchi, the chef, he was cooking his whole life. But there are some people who made major changes, going from prisoner to professor, for example. So I was searching for examples of cases where people made major career shifts. So I asked ChatGPT, who has made major career shifts and achieved success? And ChatGPT puts up 6 examples. One of them is Julia Child. Julia Child is a French chef, right? So this is something that I learned writing the book. Julia Child, until she was in her mid-30s, worked for the OSS, which is the precursor to the CIA. So basically, Julia Child was kind of a spook.
That's insane. I didn't know that about her. That's very cool.
So Julia Child was a spook. Yeah. She marries another spook in the OSS. They move to Paris. She gets exposed to French cooking. That's how Julia Child went from spook to chef. I would have never found that out. Is that cheating to ask ChatGPT? I don't think so. Now, with ChatGPT, you also got to make sure that, this is a fact. So luckily, I have Madison GPT. And Madison GPT, I tell her, Madison, ChatGPT said Julia Child worked for the OSS. You got to verify that for me, because I'm putting it in the book. So a human checks these things. So that's one way as a research assistant. I also use it. I put like blocks of text in it, and I say, look for errors. I also say, make it shorter, and other tactical uses. So before there was Roger's Thesaurus, and then there was thesaurus.com. But I think the beauty of ChatGPT is that you can make it look not just for a synonym, one word for another word, but you can make it like a synonym kind of a concept where I say, let's say I want to talk about, I use the phrase jump to the next curve for innovation. You go from ice harvesting to ice factory to refrigerator. You go from file folder to steel case folder to virtual folder to, cloud storage. I mean, curve jumps, right? So you go to ChatGPT and you say, give me other terms for jumping curves. And it comes up with 6 different things. I could have never thought of that. And so why is that cheating? I think that ChatGPT and Bard and Claude and Quillbot have made me a better writer. There's no doubt in my mind I am a better writer because of them.
I guess what people try and figure out is, where does the machine input replace the human input to the point where passing off the work as your own is no longer ethical? I think that's the question, but that's a hard line to draw in the sand. I don't know what it is, and as more people use it, like for example, it'll get to the point. Go ahead. Well, I have a thought, but like it'll get to the point where you can say like write an article on this subject, and it could probably write it with better references, quicker, more accuracy, better verbiage than a human writer. Probably not far.
Okay, so first of all, even when I use it, well, I never use it. Well, I certainly didn't say, ChatGPT, write me a 200-page book about how to be remarkable. I swear to God, I did not do that. No billionaire is going to get me in trouble by finding that I did it that way. I did not do it.
Yeah, Bill is on a little bit of a rampage right now.
So I definitely did not do it that way. But I think that it improves you. You can also, I do a lot of editing even after it spits out stuff at me.
Yeah.
And as I say, to find similar concepts, and you know what? I mean, like, let's take the extreme example. You cannot use ChatGPT to write your college app. Okay? So, yeah, that's heinous. Billionaires are screaming about it. You cannot use ChatGPT to write your college app. Of course, your kids had a $250 an hour college app.
Tutor, whatever. Yeah.
Wrote it for your kid. Right? Like, what's worse?
I actually found that funny because any billionaire, not every billionaire, many billionaires, in my personal opinion, who have written books, it's all ghostwritten.
Yeah, absolutely.
This is what happens. You're on a Zoom and you have a ghostwriter and you're telling your life story and the person writes a book and it's a ghostwriter. And that's what happened. And I mean, there's some great writers out there, but not every billionaire is a great writer.
None of them are.
So they just hire people.
Right. So how is that any worse? Or not? How is that any better?
It's the same.
Yeah, it's the same. It's the same. And like, okay, continuing on this example, let's say that you say to college, you say to ChatGPT, hey, give me an example of an application letter for why I want to go to Stanford. And it writes you this letter. And, it says, of course, world-class professors, and it says great location and, whatever. But it comes up with a fifth reason that you never thought of. So you put that in your application. Is that not legitimate? No, I'm not saying just copy and paste. I'm saying, ChatGPT came up with an idea that, it never even occurred to me. What's wrong with that? And
I don't think
I can tell you, ChatGPT came up with ideas for my book that never occurred to me. So if you're listening to this, what I'm telling you is, I used every weapon at my disposal to write the best book for you. And I think that's the standard you should hold any author to. That, if you want to say, okay, just give me the best book that you could do yourself, or give me the best book possible. That's what you should be asking. Give me the best book possible. Because I don't care if I'm become remarkable because you asked ChatGPT or you did it all yourself. I just want to be remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I got to go.
I know. Let's
getting into my surfing time.
I know. Okay, let's finish this up. Where should people... It's been a long podcast. I appreciate it. This is a lot of fun. Where should people connect with you? Where do you want to send people? You have GuyKawasaki.com. Where should they get the book? It's coming out in March.
Yeah. I mean, listen, I'm with Wiley, and Wiley is a great publisher. They'll have the book everywhere. Obviously Amazon. And it's fine. Finding your book is not going to be hard. There is GuyKawasaki.com. But let me put it to you this way. If you seriously want to be remarkable and you cannot find the book, you're not going to be remarkable, because on a scale of challenges, finding my book in March is trivial compared to what it takes to be remarkable.
You know what? I don't want to do anything else. I want to end on that. I think that's the best way to sign off.